Siamo naturalmente molto contenti di avere l'opportunità di incontrare qui a Venezia Tom Regan e signora. We are very happy to meet you in Venice and your wife. E lo si deve alla LAV che ha intercettato la presenza di Regan nella nostra città e per cui darei subito poi mi riprendo la parola, mentre darei a Gianluca Felicetti della LAV nazionale a cui dobbiamo questa bella opportunità.
Grazie all'assessore Gianfranco Bettin.
È un incontro molto informale,
sì,
se la sede è solenne,
per carità,
per non appesantire gli impegni già.
Grazie alla Città di Venezia per quello che sarà la consegna di questo riconoscimento a Tom Regan. Tom Regan è qui in Italia perché qualche giorno fa, per la prima volta, la questione dei diritti degli animali è stata protagonista al Festival Filosofia di Modena, un importante palcoscenico dove diverse migliaia di persone hanno, certo, hanno potuto seguire una piazza affollatissima e anche tramite video nelle altre piazze di Modena hanno potuto seguire una Lectio Magistralis di Tom Regan, che è stato quindi ospite del Festival Filosofia di Modena, e poi l'opportunità di essere a Venezia ci ha appunto così portati a contattare l'assessore Bettin e a concordare questo piccolo ma significativo incontro che noi per il quale noi della LAV appunto ringraziamo la Città di Venezia.
It's a great honor for us to give you a little sign, but a sincere sign of our admiration for your work, for the respect of all living beings and peace among the living beings. It is a Venetian symbol, and it's the sign of our friendship, if you want. This is a lion. Venice is a town where the lions fly and the dogs, kitchen, work. This is the lion.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
The lion of war with a sword.
The lion
By all peace.
Well, I'm so appreciative of this great honor, and I feel lucky that I've written out my words, because otherwise I might be as speechless as a statue. And to think that I would receive such an award in Venice, the jewel in the crown of all of Italy. Those of you who are familiar with my work, my background, know how unaware I was of what was happening, what was being done to animals. For more than 30 years of my life, I didn't know anything about vivisection or steel-jawed leg hold traps. I didn't know about the veal crate or the treatment of animals in circuses and zoos, or about the mass shipment of sheep from Australia to the Middle East. Whereas, had I known, I probably would not have been bothered. The reason I say this is because I did not care much about animals. In fact, in my late teens, I worked in a butcher shop. I sliced and I diced. I ground and I minced. I hacked and I sawed. Their cold flesh gave way to my cruel will. As I've observed in the past, if you picture indifference to the plight of animals as a big cave, you would have found me with my back up against the rear wall. That's how indifferent I was. In my book, Empty Cages, Facing the Challenge of Animal Rights, I describe 3 different paths that people can take to becoming an animal rights advocate. First, there are what I call the Da Vincians, so named in honor of Leonardo. Everybody, I needn't say this in Italy, but everybody knows something about his great works of art, the Last Supper, the Mona Lisa, and other masterpieces. Fewer people know anything about his compassion and empathy for animals. For example, at a very early age, Leonardo refused to eat meat, not wanting to be a part, play any role in their suffering or death. And he, as you may know, went even further. He didn't drink milk, he didn't eat eggs, he didn't eat cheese. He was a vegan. From all that we know about Leonardo, he did not ask for some proof for why he should feel and think the way he did. He did not ask to be persuaded. Having sympathy and empathy was just the way he was, as if caring for animals the way he did was in his genes. Then there are what I call the Damascus, named this time in honor of the biblical story of Saul on the road to Damascus, with which I'm sure many of you are familiar. Some animal rights advocates that my wife and I have met take up the cause because, like Saul, they have a single life-transforming experience. They see something, or they hear something, or read something, and just like that, in the blink of an eye, their life is changed. Whereas before they were indifferent to animal suffering and death, now they want to do everything they can to help the victims of human cruelty and callousness. Like Da Vincians, Damascans do not ask for a proof. They don't ask to be persuaded. But unlike Da Vincians, Damascans are not by their nature sympathetic and compassionate towards animals. They become that way because of a life-transforming experience. If you remember, if you look at Empty Cages, I have the optical illusion where you can see 2 faces or a vase, and it's like all their life, all they could see was the vase. And then they have a change of perception and see the 2 faces. In my own case, I am neither a Da Vincian nor a Damascus. No, I grew gradually into becoming an animal rights advocate, a step at a time. I was what I call a muddler. Well, anyhow, I was a muddler, just muddling along, learning, asking questions, finding answers, talking to people, willing to learn. My wife Nancy and I, and just earlier in June, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. We were active in the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War. I decided that I would try to make a philosophical contribution to the movement. The problem was I had not read any of the relevant literature. So there I was in my university library, and I took down a book and read the title. And the title was an autobiography, the story of my experiments with truth. And the author's name was a name I recognized, but I had never read anything by him. And the author's name was Mohandas K. Gandhi. Gandhi had an enormous impact on my thinking. Of course, he was a pacifist and against war. He stood for peace and against violence. And just what I wanted to help me make a philosophical contribution to the anti-war movement. The problem was, Gandhi says, violence doesn't stop at the borders of human beings. If you're truly committed to trying to lead a nonviolent life, then you have to regard the fork as a possible weapon of violence. And it is a weapon of violence if it's used where animals have suffered and been killed to put their flesh, their dead flesh, on your plate. Well, this was like a wake-up call for Nancy and me. He also argued, of course, that the fork can be a weapon of, or symbol of peace. And it is a symbol of peace when you use it not to eat the dead flesh. Well, I think this idea of Gandhi as representing peace is especially appropriate in Venice, a city of peace. I think Gandhi has an important message. One day during this period of quest and reading and so on, I looked in the mirror and I saw an animal rights advocate looking back at me. I was surprised. Anyhow, I share these thoughts not because I think I'm an exceptional person, not at all. No, I share them because what they tell me and what I believe most profoundly is this simple truth. If Tom Regan can become an animal rights advocate, anyone can become an animal rights advocate. And I share these thoughts as well because I hope those of you who already are animal rights advocates will take heart and believe in the great possibilities that lie ahead. This we know, the animal rights movement is not going anywhere except maybe backwards if too few people join the cause. If too few people want to bring an end to the undeclared war we are waging against other animals. My simple message on this occasion is, we can go forward, and we will go forward. Not as quickly as we want, not tomorrow, not the next day, not next year. But someday, surely, the cages will not be larger, the cages will be empty. Thank you again for this wonderful moment.